Let's go to some questions and see what
Absolutely, and this would be where you can maybe share your opinion a little bit more on this. Governor Purple Hayes is asking, do you think that the Free Palestine crew that got into the Capitol should be treated just like the poor folks from January 6th, those same people?
Yeah, my answer is yes. The better answer would be, I wish the January 6th people hadn't been treated like they were. They were treated as if they firebombed the place. Now, the people that rioted, I said from the week it happened, that was criminal activity. And especially if they struck a police officer or refused to obey orders, there's some things that nobody wants to defend because it was criminal activity. They should pay for it. But there were a lot of people this weekend on our show. Brandon Struck, who's going to be one of our guests, the founder of the Walkaway Movement, wasn't even going into the building on January 6th. He was in Washington. He was on the grounds. He never went in. He didn't hit anyone, didn't get in an argument with anyone. He got arrested, put on an ankle monitor, put on the no-fly list. We'll talk about it with him this weekend. So do I think that the people who did what they did yesterday should get the same treatment as January 6th? Absolutely. Because otherwise, what Merrick Garland said recently about there's not two sets of rules, one for Democrats and one for Republicans, we're looking at this, we say, you know, yeah, there really is, Merrick, I'm sorry, but does seem to be two sets of rules.
Michael Harder is asking today, Gov, what are your thoughts on the Israeli government wanting to arm all citizens now that they're being attacked, while we have politicians in the U.S. trying to subvert the Second Amendment?
Yeah, I think a lot of Israelis saw that the lack of ability for many just private citizens to have firearms at their home, unless they were reservists or some other mitigating circumstance, left them absolutely vulnerable. Had they been armed, they could have at least fought off some of the terrorists who broke out of Gaza and broke into the communities and started just killing people. You know, these were defenseless people. They had no weapons, they had no arms, they had no forewarning. It was just awful. So might be a reminder why we have a Second Amendment. And by the way, for those who say nobody needs an AR-15, well, when you've got terrorists coming over there with fully automatic weapons, you know, a single-shot 22 ain't going to be enough. The AR-15 with a 30-round magazine might be exactly what you need. I want to get into Israel because obviously you cannot turn on your television, radio, or read a newspaper without realizing that Israel is at war with Hamas. It was not started by Israel. I'm so sick when I hear these people on national television. CNN is bad. MSNBC is the worst by far, who tries to make it some equivocable issue between Hamas and Israel. It's not. This is not a both sidesism where, well, now both sides ought to. No. Hamas attacked Israel and didn't attack so much the country, its military, or its infrastructure. It attacked by killing in cold blood women, children, elderly people in a surprise sneak attack that was the most vicious, brutal assault on human dignity since the Holocaust. Just horrific things that were done. And I think it's interesting when Joe Biden first sat down with Bibi Netanyahu. To his credit, Joe Biden, let me be fair, has been vocal, outspoken, as has Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, in verbally expressing their support for Israel in the midst of this. I appreciate that. I truly do. But when he first sat down with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he was reading from some index cards, and you could tell he was utterly confused by what he was reading, and he finally just trailed off. Let's watch.
You know, years ago, I asked the Secretary of State when he and I were working in the Senate to write something for me, and he said, he wrote a line that I think is appropriate. He said, it's not, we lead, not just, well, I won't go into it. I'll wait later. Taking too much time.
What do you mean you're taking too much time? It's your time. You're the President of the United States. You can take all the time you want. What happened, Joe? I mean, we all know we're not stupid. You forgot what the line was. It's like setting up a joke on stage at the comedy club and then forgetting the punchline and then just trailing off and saying, well, here's that line he wrote in a speech, and, well, we won't go into it and taking up too much time. I'll tell you later. He never told us later. Never told us later. A responsible press would have said, Mr. President, you said you were going to tell us later. What was it you were going to tell us? Because now is later and you can tell us. But they deep down are covering for him because they know he doesn't remember it. He doesn't know. After he finishes this news conference with the Prime Minister, he turns and, as expected, took no questions. He just shuffled off backstage.
Mr. President, what is your red line that would prompt you U.S. military involvement in this war.
Mr. President, your team said you have tough questions.
And there he goes. He's gone. No questions. Meanwhile, back here at home, it's been a bizarre thing to watch hordes of people act on utter misinformation and disinformation and go out into the streets to support the Palestinians. And in doing so, they're basically supporting what Hamas did to Israel. And I find this just not just objectionable, but unseemly. Dearborn, Michigan, we'll show you a little of the video, as you can see here. Thousands of people, Dearborn, Michigan, marching in the streets, pro-Palestinian. What you may not be able to hear in the background, what they're chanting is "from the river to the sea." That is a big Palestinian chant. What does that mean? It means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And it means that their goal is to wipe out Israel, because Israel basically exists between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. So when they say from the river to the sea, what they're saying is we will wipe Israel off the face of the map and take all that for ourselves. That's pretty blatant. In the midst of that, there was also nothing short of an insurrection going on at the Capitol. Now, you say, well, I didn't think you liked that word insurrection, because on January 6th, you said it wasn't an insurrection because they really weren't trying to take over the government. They were just engaging in what some of them got a little overheated with and turned it into a riot. That's true. But if the Democrats are going to call that an insurrection, then what we saw this week could be described as nothing else other than an insurrection. You watch and tell me. As you can see, the Capitol is full of people. I wonder if they all came through metal detectors. They scream, they yell, and don't think that this was all just fun and games, because there was also fighting with police. There was ripping down of signs and vandalism inside the Capitol. There were 300 arrests, but I wonder how many of them will be put in solitary confinement for 8 months to a year, awaiting on a pre-trial hearing. I bet not many, if any. And that's where hundreds of January 6th protesters were. From the time that they were arrested, immediately after that, months and months in solitary confinement in a Washington, D.C. jail. Unbelievable kind of activities. Here's the big question. Could you say that what happened yesterday was an insurrection? And where is the media coverage? Where is the outrage? Where is Liz Cheney flying into Washington, demanding that we hold hearings and get to the bottom of this? Here's just some more footage. This guy doesn't look like he's real happy. He's fighting with the police, resisting arrest. This was going on throughout the time. You know, it's just been baffling to see what has become of the media. They've lost any sense of objective reporting. They're just cheering for the far left all the stinking time. Yeah. Anyway, our top comment from last week's live stream comes from Elizabeth Brady. She said, I quote, "I'm glad to hear about the rich donors pulling out of Harvard. So encouraging. There had to be an intolerable limit, and this is it." Elizabeth, I agree with you. It's just been amazing to see many of the highest dollar donors for the big universities, not just Harvard, but also the Huntsman family of Utah, one of the richest families in the country, big givers to University of Pennsylvania, to Penn. And they said, not another dime. We're done with you. I think this is great. It's about time that the donors put their checkbooks in the drawer and say, you know, if you're going to get out there and condemn Israel, whose people are being slaughtered and massacred, and you're going to defend the people who did the murdering, then we don't want to help that institution anymore.
I think some forgot that the checkbook has a pretty loud voice.
Ooh, yes, it does. And I'm glad it does. And really, up until now, even the people with the checkbooks kind of looked the other way with all the wokeism on campus. But this was a bridge too far. Yeah. And for many people, they could not abide by the fact that this was not just idiotic Marxism. This was the murder of innocent children and women and families. And how do you defend that? Well, civilized people don't. That's the whole point. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I hope you will now. The button is just below this video, and there's a little bell next to it. If you click on those, YouTube will reluctantly start letting you know when we've got a new video uploaded.